The golden autumn light filtered through the tall windows of Clarence's house as Queen Consort Camilla sat at her mahogany desk, carefully reviewing the guest list for what would be one of the most important charitable events of the year. The annual Royal Foundation Gala was approaching, and every detail needed to be perfect. Her fingers traced down the elegant cream-colored paper, pausing at certain names as she considered their importance to the evening's success. Camilla had been working tirelessly to establish her own identity within the royal family since becoming Queen Consort. The transition hadn't been easy, and she knew that many still viewed her with skepticism. This gala represented an opportunity to showcase her commitment to causes close to her heart, particularly literacy programs and support for victims of domestic violence. She wanted the evening to reflect her values and the direction she hoped to take the monarchy. As she continued reviewing the list, her pen hovered over one particular section. The immediate royal family members were, of course, expected to attend. King Charles would be by her side, as would other senior royals. But, when her eyes fell upon Catherine's name, she felt a familiar knot form in her stomach. The Princess of Wales had always been the darling of the British public, effortlessly graceful and universally beloved. Her presence at any event inevitably drew attention away from others. Camilla set down her pen and leaned back in her chair, gazing out at the carefully manicured gardens. She thought about the upcoming gala's purpose and theme. This was meant to be her moment to shine, to show the world that she could lead meaningful charitable initiatives and bring attention to causes that truly mattered. The media would undoubtedly focus on Catherine if she attended, analyzing every detail of her outfit, her interactions, and her speeches. The carefully planned focus on literacy and domestic violence support might be overshadowed by fascination with Catherine's latest fashion choices or her natural charisma with the guests. The Queen Consort's private secretary, Eleanor, knocked softly on the door before entering. She was a woman in her 50s with silver hair pulled back in an elegant chignon, who had served the royal household for over 2 decades. Eleanor had witnessed the evolution of the family through various scandals, celebrations, and transformations. "Your Majesty, the final guest list needs to be approved by this afternoon for the printing of the programs," Eleanor said, approaching the desk with measured steps. Camilla looked up from the papers spread before her. "Yes, I've been reviewing it carefully. This event is so important to me, Eleanor. I want everything to be perfect." "Of course, Your Majesty. The charities are deeply grateful for your support, and I'm confident the evening will be a tremendous success." Camilla picked up her pen again, her fingers tightening slightly around it. "I've been thinking about the dynamics of the evening, about ensuring the focus remains on the causes we're supporting rather than other distractions." Eleanor nodded diplomatically. She had worked with enough royals to understand the delicate balance of personalities and public attention that surrounded every major event. "Certainly, Your Majesty. The success of charitable endeavors often depends on maintaining clear messaging throughout the evening." The Queen Consort's eyes returned to Catherine's name on the list. She thought about previous events where the Princess of Wales had attended. Inevitably, photographers focused on her, social media buzzed with admiration for her style and grace, and news coverage emphasized her every gesture. While Catherine's intentions were always good, her presence had a way of dominating any room she entered. "I'm considering making some adjustments to ensure the evening's purpose remains clear," Camilla said carefully, her voice measured and thoughtful. Eleanor waited respectfully for her to continue, understanding that major decisions often required careful deliberation. Camilla thought about her relationship with William and Catherine over the years. It had been complex and sometimes strained, particularly in the early days following Diana's death and her own relationship with Charles. She had worked hard to build bridges, to show respect for Diana's memory while also finding her own place within the family structure. There had been moments of warmth and cooperation, but also underlying tensions that never quite disappeared. The Princess of Wales represented everything that Camilla felt. She was not young, naturally beautiful, effortlessly popular with the public. Catherine's charitable work was genuinely impactful, but it also came with an ease that Camilla envied. When Catherine spoke about mental health initiatives or early childhood development, people listened with rapt attention. When Camilla discussed literacy programs or domestic violence support, the response was polite but often felt less enthusiastic. Your Majesty, Eleanor said gently, would you like me to make any specific arrangements for the evening? Camilla made a decision that would have far-reaching consequences. With deliberate strokes of her pen, she drew a line through Catherine's name on the guest list. The action felt both liberating and terrifying at the same time. I think a more intimate gathering might serve our purposes better, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. We'll focus on the core supporters of these particular charities. Eleanor glanced at the amended list, noting the absence of the Princess of Wales. Her expression remained neutral, but Camilla could sense the weight of the decision settling in the room. Shall I prepare the revised invitations accordingly? Eleanor asked. Yes, and please ensure that the messaging emphasizes the specific focus on literacy and domestic violence support. I want attendees to understand that this is a working event, not a social gathering. As Eleanor gathered the papers and prepared to leave, Camilla felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. She had taken control of her own event, ensuring that the focus would remain where she wanted it. But she also knew that this decision would not go unnoticed by the family, particularly by William. The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings and preparations. Camilla threw herself into the details of the gala, working with caterers, reviewing the program, and finalizing speeches. She met with representatives from the literacy charity and the domestic violence support organization, discussing their goals and how the evening could best serve their needs. Later that evening, as she sat in her private sitting room with Charles, she felt the weight of her decision settling more heavily upon her. The king was reading through briefing papers, occasionally glancing up to share observations about upcoming engagements. The gala preparations are progressing well, she mentioned casually, testing the waters. Charles looked up with genuine interest. Wonderful. It's such an important cause, and I know how much this means to you. I've been very selective with the guest list to ensure we maintain focus on the charitable purposes, she continued, watching his reaction carefully. That's wise, Charles agreed, returning to his papers. Sometimes these events can become too scattered in their messaging. Camilla felt a small sense of relief that he seemed supportive of her approach, even if he didn't yet know the specific details of her decisions. Meanwhile, across London, Catherine was in her study at Kensington Palace, reviewing her own upcoming schedule with her private secretary, James. The room was comfortable and lived in, with family photographs scattered across the desk and children's artwork displayed on a nearby bulletin board. The Royal Foundation Gala is coming up soon, James mentioned, checking his calendar. Should I confirm your attendance and begin coordinating with their team? Catherine nodded absently, focused on reviewing notes for an upcoming engagement at a children's hospital. She had been looking forward to the gala, particularly because of its focus on causes that aligned with her own charitable interests. The literacy component especially excited her, as it connected with her early childhood development work. Yes, please coordinate with their office. I'd like to understand more about the specific organizations being supported so I can prepare appropriately. James made notes in his planner. I'll reach out to Clarence House tomorrow to begin the coordination. Neither Catherine nor William had any indication that their names had already been removed from the guest list. They continued their evening routine, discussing their children's activities and upcoming royal duties, unaware that a decision had been made that would soon create significant tension within the family. Back at Clarence House, Camilla lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling as Charles slept peacefully beside her. She replayed her decision over and over, alternating between feeling justified and questioning whether she had made the right choice. The gala was still weeks away, but she knew that the revised guest list would soon be distributed, and the absence of certain names would not go unnoticed. She thought about her journey to this point, the years of criticism, the constant comparisons to Diana, the struggle to find acceptance within the royal family and among the British public. This gala represented an opportunity to step out from the shadows and demonstrate her own value as queen consort. She had causes she cared deeply about, and she wanted the chance to advocate for them without the distraction of media attention focused elsewhere. The next morning brought a flurry of activity as final preparations for the gala moved into high gear. Eleanor worked efficiently to coordinate with various offices and organizations, while Camilla threw herself into speechwriting and menu planning. She wanted every detail to reflect her vision for the evening. It was during a meeting with the catering coordinator that Eleanor approached with a concerned expression. "Your Majesty, I've received a call from Kensington Palace. They're inquiring about coordination details for the gala." Camilla felt her stomach tighten. What kind of coordination details? The Princess of Wales's office is requesting information about the program timing and dress code so they can prepare appropriately. The moment Camilla had been dreading had arrived. The decision she had made in the privacy of her study was about to become known to the family, and she knew there would be consequences. "Please have them call me directly," Camilla said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'll handle the coordination personally." Eleanor nodded and retreated, leaving Camilla alone with her thoughts and the growing realization that she was about to face a confrontation she had hoped to avoid. The phone call came that afternoon. Catherine's voice was warm and enthusiastic as she discussed her excitement about the upcoming gala and her ideas for supporting the featured charities. "I've been doing some research on the literacy programs," Catherine said. "I think there might be wonderful opportunities to connect this work with early childhood development initiatives." Camilla closed her eyes, steeling herself for what she had to say. "Catherine, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but I need to inform you that we've decided to keep this particular event quite small and focused." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Of course, I understand the importance of maintaining focus. How can I best support that approach?" "We've actually decided to limit attendance to the core supporters and beneficiaries of these specific charities," Camilla said, her voice becoming more formal. "I'm afraid that means we won't be able to include you and William on this occasion." The silence that followed was deafening. Camilla could almost hear Catherine processing the information, trying to understand what was really being said. "I see," Catherine finally responded, her voice noticeably cooler. "May I ask what prompted this decision?" Camilla had prepared for this question, but found herself struggling to articulate her reasoning without sounding petty or jealous. "As I mentioned, we want to maintain a very specific focus on the charitable purposes. Sometimes broader attendance can dilute the messaging." "I understand," Catherine said quietly. "I'll inform William of the change in plans." After the call ended, Camilla sat in her chair, feeling both vindicated and deeply uneasy. She had taken control of her event, but she knew the repercussions were just beginning. That evening, Catherine sat in the drawing room at Kensington Palace, waiting for William to return from his engagements. When he finally arrived, she could see the exhaustion in his face from a long day of royal duties. "How was your day?" he asked, settling into his favorite chair and loosening his tie. Catherine took a deep breath, knowing that what she was about to say would change the atmosphere of their peaceful evening. "I had an interesting conversation with Camilla today about the Royal Foundation Gala." William looked up with curiosity. "Oh? What about it?" "It seems we're not invited anymore," Catherine said simply, watching his confusion and then anger flickered across her husband's face. The story was just beginning, and the decisions made in the quiet of Camilla's study were about to ripple through the royal family in ways that none of them had fully anticipated. William's face went through a series of expressions as Catherine's words sank in. First confusion, then disbelief, and, finally, a cold anger that Catherine had rarely seen in her husband. He set down his briefcase with deliberate care, as if the simple action required all of his concentration. "What do you mean we're not invited anymore?" His voice was dangerously quiet, the kind of tone that those who knew him well recognized as a warning sign. Catherine moved closer to him, placing a gentle hand on his arm. "Camilla called this afternoon. She said they've decided to keep the event small and focused, limited to core supporters of the specific charities involved." William stood up abruptly, running his hands through his hair in a gesture Catherine recognized as a sign of deep frustration. "Core supporters? We've been supporting these causes for years. The Royal Foundation has donated hundreds of thousands of pounds to literacy programs." "I know," Catherine said softly. I tried to understand her reasoning, but it didn't make much sense to me either. William began pacing the length of the drawing room, his mind racing as he tried to process what had happened. This wasn't just about missing a party or a social event. This was about respect, about family dynamics, and about the very delicate balance of roles within the monarchy. "Did she give you any other explanation?" he asked, stopping in front of the window that overlooked their private garden. Catherine hesitated, remembering the awkwardness of the phone conversation. She mentioned something about broader attendance diluting the messaging. "But, William, I got the distinct impression there was more to it than that." William turned back to face his wife, his expression hardening. "Of course there was more to it. This isn't about messaging or focus. This is about something else entirely." Catherine had been married to William long enough to understand the complex dynamics within the royal family. She knew about the years of tension between Camilla and various family members, the careful navigation required around sensitive topics, and the ongoing struggle for relevance and recognition that seemed to affect everyone in their circle. "What do you think we should do?" she asked, though she could already see the determination building in her husband's eyes. "I'm going to call my father," William said, reaching for his phone. "This is completely unacceptable." Catherine caught his hand before he could dial. "Maybe we should think about this carefully first. You know how these family situations can escalate quickly." But William was beyond careful consideration. The exclusion of his wife from a major royal event felt like a direct insult, not just to Catherine but to him and their position within the family hierarchy. As the heir to the throne, he expected a certain level of respect and inclusion in family decisions. "Catherine, this isn't just about one event. If we let this slide, what message does that send? That Camilla can arbitrarily exclude family members from royal functions? That our support and involvement doesn't matter?" Catherine understood his anger, but she also worried about the consequences of a direct confrontation. The royal family had weathered numerous scandals and internal conflicts over the years, but they had always been handled with discretion and careful diplomatic maneuvering. "I agree that this needs to be addressed," she said carefully. "I just think we need to consider the best approach." William sat back down, but his posture remained tense. "The best approach is honesty. My father needs to know what's happening here, and Camilla needs to understand that this kind of behavior is unacceptable." Meanwhile, at Clarence House, Camilla was experiencing her own internal turmoil. The conversation with Catherine had gone as well as could be expected, but she knew that the real challenge lay ahead. William would not take this news quietly, and Charles would inevitably become involved. She found herself in the unusual position of needing to justify a decision that had felt so clear and necessary when she made it. In the privacy of her study, surrounded by papers and planning documents, it had seemed obvious that focusing the event would better serve her charitable goals. Now, facing the reality of family backlash, she began to question whether she had considered all the implications. Eleanor knocked softly on her door, entering with a concerned expression that had become familiar over the past few days. "Your Majesty, there have been several calls from various royal offices this afternoon. It seems word of the revised guest list is beginning to circulate." Camilla felt her stomach clench. "What kind of calls?" "Inquiries about coordination, mostly. But I suspect there will be more direct communication soon." As if summoned by their conversation, Camilla's phone rang. The caller ID showed Charles's private line, and she knew immediately that the conversation she had been dreading was about to begin. "Hello, darling," she said, trying to keep her voice light and natural. "Camilla, I've just had a rather heated conversation with William," Charles said without preamble. His voice carried the weariness of a man who had spent decades navigating family conflicts. "He's quite upset about the gala situation." Camilla closed her eyes, knowing that this moment had been inevitable. "I see. What did he say?" "He feels that excluding Catherine from the guest list was inappropriate and disrespectful. He's questioning the reasoning behind the decision." "Charles, I explained to Catherine that we're keeping the event focused and small. These charitable causes deserve attention without the usual social distractions." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and Camilla could sense her husband weighing his words carefully. "I understand your desire to maintain focus, but William has a point about family inclusion. Catherine has been a strong supporter of literacy initiatives." "That's true," Camilla acknowledged, But this particular event has a very specific purpose. I want to highlight organizations that don't always receive the attention they deserve. Charles sighed, a sound that conveyed years of experience with similar family tensions. I think perhaps we need to discuss this in person. William is quite adamant about this, and I'd like to understand your perspective more fully. Of course, Camilla agreed, though she felt a growing sense of dread about the conversation that lay ahead. That evening, the three of them met in Charles's private study at Clarence's house. The room was lined with books and filled with comfortable furniture, but the atmosphere was anything but relaxed. William arrived with barely contained anger, while Charles attempted to mediate and Camilla prepared to defend her decision. I want to understand the real reasoning behind excluding Catherine, William said immediately, not bothering with social pleasantries. Camilla took a deep breath, knowing that this conversation would determine much about her future relationship with William and Catherine. The gala is meant to highlight specific charitable causes that I feel passionate about. I wanted to ensure that the focus remained on those organizations and their needs. But Catherine supports those same causes, William pointed out. Her presence wouldn't detract from the charitable focus, it would enhance it. Sometimes, Camilla said carefully, high-profile attendance can overshadow the actual charitable work being done. The media tends to focus on personalities rather than purposes. William's expression hardened further. Are you saying that Catherine's presence would be a distraction? The question hung in the air, and Camilla realized she was at a crucial decision point. She could either retreat from her position and reinstate Catherine's invitation, or she could stand her ground and face the consequences. I'm saying that for this particular event, I felt it was important to maintain a very specific atmosphere and focus. Charles intervened before William could respond. Perhaps we can find a compromise here. Camilla, your goals for the evening are admirable, but William raises valid points about family inclusion and support. But William was beyond compromise. The exclusion of his wife felt like a fundamental disrespect that couldn't be smoothed over with diplomatic language. This isn't just about one event, he said, his voice rising slightly. This is about respect and inclusion within our own family. If Camilla can arbitrarily exclude family members from royal functions, what does that say about how we operate? Camilla felt cornered and defensive. I'm not arbitrarily excluding anyone. I'm making thoughtful decisions about how to best serve charitable causes that matter to me. By excluding the future queen from a royal charitable event? William's question was sharp and pointed. The mention of Catherine as the future queen hit Camilla with particular force. It was a reminder of the hierarchy within the family and the temporary nature of her own position as queen consort. William and Catherine represented the future of the monarchy, while she was seen by many as a transitional figure. I think we all need to take a step back, Charles said, sensing the escalating tension in the room. These are all valid concerns that deserve careful consideration. But William had heard enough. He stood up abruptly, his decision made. I've heard Camilla's reasoning, and I find it unacceptable. If Catherine isn't welcome at this event, then neither am I. William, please, Charles began, but his son was already moving toward the door. This isn't just about the gala anymore, William said, turning back to face both Charles and Camilla. This is about basic respect and inclusion within our family. If that's too much to ask, then perhaps we need to reconsider how we participate in family events going forward. With that, he left the study, leaving Charles and Camilla to face the aftermath of a conversation that had resolved nothing and potentially damaged family relationships beyond repair. Charles looked at his wife with a mixture of love and frustration. Camilla, I understand your goals for this event, but William has valid concerns. Perhaps there's a way to address both issues. Camilla felt exhausted by the confrontation and overwhelmed by the unexpected intensity of William's reaction. I never intended for this to become such a significant issue. I was simply trying to create the best possible environment for charitable fundraising. I believe that, Charles said gently, but the impact of our decisions sometimes extends beyond our intentions. William feels that Catherine has been treated disrespectfully, and, as her husband, he's responding accordingly. Camilla nodded, understanding the logic but still feeling that her original concerns were valid. The evening had become about family politics rather than charitable causes, exactly what she had been trying to avoid. "What do you think I should do?" she asked, genuinely uncertain about the best path forward. Charles considered the question carefully. "I think you need to decide whether your goals for this specific event are worth the potential damage to family relationships. And you need to consider whether there might be ways to achieve both objectives." As Charles spoke, Camilla realized that her decision about the guest list had opened a much larger conversation about roles, respect, and hierarchy within the family. What had started as an attempt to control the focus of one evening had become a defining moment in her relationships with the next generation of royals. Meanwhile, William drove back to Kensington Palace in frustrated silence. His conversation with Catherine that evening would determine their next steps, but he already knew that simply accepting Camilla's decision was not an option. When he arrived home, Catherine was waiting in their sitting room, having put the children to bed and spent the evening thinking about the situation they now found themselves in. "How did it go?" she asked, though his expression already provided much of the answer. "Not well," William said, sitting down heavily beside her. "Camilla is standing by her decision, and my father is trying to play peacemaker." Catherine took his hand, feeling the tension in his grip. "What happens now?" William looked at his wife, thinking about her years of dedicated service to the monarchy, her genuine commitment to charitable causes, and the respect she deserved as both a member of the family and the future queen. "Now we decide whether we're going to accept being treated this way," he said quietly. "And I can tell you right now, I'm not inclined to simply let this slide." The battle lines were being drawn, and both sides were preparing for a conflict that would test the very foundations of family unity within the House of Windsor. The gala that Camilla had envisioned as a focused charitable event was becoming the catalyst for a much larger reckoning about power, respect, and the future direction of the royal family. Neither side showed any sign of backing down, and the consequences of their standoff would soon extend far beyond the walls of their private residences. The royal family was heading toward a public confrontation that would capture the attention of the media and the public, transforming a private family dispute into a very public crisis. The stage was set for a dramatic escalation that would force everyone involved to confront fundamental questions about their relationships, their roles, and their commitment to the institution they all served. The following morning brought an atmosphere of tension that seemed to permeate every corner of the royal households. William woke with his resolve even stronger than the night before, while Catherine found herself caught between supporting her husband and hoping for a peaceful resolution. At Clarence House, Camilla sat at her breakfast table, barely touching her morning tea as she contemplated the growing crisis she had inadvertently created. Charles had spent a restless night thinking about the conversation in his study. As king, he had hoped that the family dynamics would stabilize after the transition from his mother's reign. Instead, he found himself facing the kind of internal conflict that had the potential to damage the monarchy's public image and undermine the careful work they had all done to rebuild trust and relevance. The first sign that the situation was escalating beyond private family disagreement came when William's private secretary, James, arrived at Kensington Palace with an unusually grave expression. He had received calls from several members of the royal household staff, all reporting unusual tension and concerning developments. "Sir, I've been contacted by Clarence House regarding coordination for upcoming engagements," James said carefully as he met with William in his private office. "There seems to be some uncertainty about scheduling and participation." William looked up from the briefing papers he had been reviewing. "What kind of uncertainty?" "Several joint engagements are being questioned, and there are discussions about revising participation in various events over the coming months." The implications hit William immediately. What had started as a disagreement about one gala was now affecting their broader working relationship as senior royals. The careful coordination that kept the monarchy functioning smoothly was being undermined by personal conflicts. "I see," William said, his jaw tightening. "And what are they proposing?" James consulted his notes, clearly uncomfortable with the message he was delivering. "There are suggestions that perhaps independent scheduling might be preferable for certain types of events, particularly those focused on specific charitable initiatives." William stood up abruptly, recognizing this as an escalation that went far beyond the original disagreement. If Camilla was now questioning their joint participation in royal duties, she was essentially challenging their roles as senior working royals. Please inform Clarence House that the Prince and Princess of Wales will continue to fulfill their royal duties as assigned by His Majesty the King, William said formally. Any questions about our participation should be directed to me personally. As James left to send the message, William felt the full weight of the crisis settling upon him. This was no longer just about hurt feelings or family dynamics. This was about the fundamental structure and operation of the monarchy itself. He found Catherine in the nursery, reading to their youngest child. The domestic scene provided a stark contrast to the institutional crisis brewing around them, and it reminded him of what was truly at stake. His children's future roles within the royal family were being affected by these adult conflicts. "We need to talk," he said quietly when Catherine finished the story. They retreated to their private sitting room, where Catherine could see immediately that something significant had changed. "It's getting worse, isn't it?" she asked. "Much worse," William confirmed, explaining the morning's developments. "This is no longer about the gala. Camilla is essentially questioning our participation in royal duties." Catherine felt a chill of realization. "She's trying to sideline us." "That's exactly what she's doing," William agreed. "And, if we allow it to happen with this event, it will set a precedent for future situations." Catherine had always tried to avoid family conflicts, preferring diplomacy and patience to confrontation. But she could see that this situation had moved beyond the point where quiet compromise was possible. "What do you want to do?" she asked, though she could already see the determination in her husband's expression. "I want to make it clear that we won't accept being treated this way," William said. "If Camilla wants to exclude us from her events and question our participation in royal duties, then she needs to understand the consequences." "What consequences?" William had been thinking about this question all morning, weighing their options and considering the potential impact of various responses. The nuclear option had been forming in his mind, and he knew it would send shockwaves through both the family and the public. "We withdraw from all joint engagements until this is resolved," he said quietly. "No shared events, no coordinated appearances, no family unity presentations until there's a fundamental understanding about respect and inclusion." Catherine felt her breath catch. Such a dramatic step would be impossible to hide from the media and the public. It would signal to the world that there were serious problems within the royal family, potentially damaging the institution they were all supposed to serve. "William, that's a very serious step. Are you sure we want to go that far?" "I'm sure that we can't continue to operate under the current circumstances," William replied. "If Camilla can arbitrarily exclude family members and question our roles, then the system isn't working." Meanwhile, at Clarence House, Camilla was facing her own moment of reckoning. Eleanor had just delivered news that made the scope of the crisis crystal clear. "Your Majesty, I've received word from Kensington Palace that the Prince and Princess of Wales are reviewing their participation in all upcoming joint engagements." Camilla looked up from her correspondence, feeling a sinking sensation in her stomach. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means they're questioning whether they'll participate in any events that involve coordination with this household," Eleanor explained diplomatically. The full impact of her decision about the gala was finally becoming clear to Camilla. What she had intended as a focused approach to one charitable event was now threatening to fracture the operational unity of the royal family. "Have they given any specific reasons?" she asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. The message simply stated that they're reviewing their approach to joint engagements pending resolution of current issues. Camilla set down her pen and leaned back in her chair. The situation had spiraled far beyond anything she had anticipated or intended. Her desire to control the focus of one evening had created a crisis that threatened to undermine the very foundation of royal cooperation. She thought about the upcoming months, filled with coordinated events, joint appearances, and shared charitable initiatives that required seamless cooperation between the various royal households. If William and Catherine withdrew their participation, it would create logistical nightmares and send obvious signals to the media and public that there were serious problems within the family. "Please ask His Majesty if he has time to see me this afternoon," she said to Eleanor. "I think we need to discuss these developments." The meeting between Charles and Camilla that afternoon was tense and difficult. Charles had spent the morning dealing with calls from various royal officials who were beginning to understand the scope of the crisis developing within the family. "This has gone too far," Charles said without preamble when Camilla entered his study. "What started as a disagreement about one event is now threatening to disrupt our entire operational structure." Camilla sat down across from her husband, feeling the full weight of the situation she had created. "I never intended for it to escalate this way." "But it has escalated," Charles pointed out. "And now we need to figure out how to resolve it before it becomes a public relations disaster." Camilla had been hoping for support from Charles, but she could see that his primary concern was the institutional damage that their family conflict was causing. "What do you think I should do?" she asked. "I think you need to consider whether your goals for this gala are worth potentially fracturing the family's working relationship," Charles replied. "And I think you need to consider the message this sends about how we operate as a unified institution." As they spoke, both of their phones began ringing with calls from other royal offices, media inquiries, and concerned staff members who were beginning to sense that something significant was happening behind the scenes. That evening, William made a decision that would transform a private family disagreement into a public crisis. He called his communications secretary and gave instructions that would change everything. "I want it known that the Prince and Princess of Wales will not be attending the Royal Foundation Gala," he said. "And I want it known that we're reviewing our participation in all upcoming joint royal engagements pending resolution of current issues." His communications secretary, Sarah, an experienced professional who had worked with the royal family for over a decade, immediately understood the implications of such a statement. "Sir, that will inevitably lead to speculation about family conflicts. Are you prepared for the media attention this will generate?" "I'm prepared for the conversation this will start," William replied. "Sometimes these issues need to be addressed publicly when they can't be resolved privately." Within hours, the story began to break. Palace sources confirmed that the Prince and Princess of Wales would not be attending the upcoming Royal Foundation Gala, and there were hints of broader scheduling conflicts that suggested deeper issues. The first headlines appeared that evening on royal news websites, with speculation about the reasons for the sudden change in plans. Social media began buzzing with theories and discussions about what the absence might mean. By the next morning, the story had exploded across all major news outlets. Royal correspondents who had covered the family for decades recognized the significance of such a public withdrawal and began investigating the deeper story. At Clarence House, Camilla woke to find herself at the center of a media storm that was entirely of her own making. The headlines spoke of royal rift, family feud, and palace crisis, with her name prominently featured in every story. Charles was in crisis management mode, fielding calls from the Prime Minister's office, royal patronage organizations, and senior members of the royal household who were concerned about the institutional damage being done. "This has become a public relations nightmare," he told Camilla over breakfast, gesturing at the newspapers spread across their dining table. "We need to find a resolution immediately." Camilla stared at the headlines, realizing that her attempt to control one evening's events had created a crisis that was now dominating news coverage and threatening to overshadow every charitable cause and royal initiative they were all working to support. "What can I do to fix this?" she asked, her voice smaller than usual. "You can start by recognizing that this isn't just about your preferences anymore," Charles replied. "This is about the functioning and reputation of the monarchy itself." Meanwhile, at Kensington Palace, William and Catherine were dealing with their own media attention. Reporters had gathered outside the palace gates, and requests for comments were pouring in from news organizations around the world. "Are you having second thoughts?" Catherine asked as they watched the morning news coverage from their private sitting room. William watched as royal experts discussed the potential implications of their withdrawal from joint engagements. He knew there was no going back now, but he also felt that they had reached a point where dramatic action was necessary. "No," he said firmly. This needed to happen. These issues needed to be addressed publicly since they couldn't be resolved privately. The royal family was now facing a very public crisis that would test their ability to maintain unity and functionality while dealing with serious internal conflicts. The battle lines had been drawn in the most visible way possible, and the entire world was watching to see how the House of Windsor would resolve their most serious internal conflict in years. The gala that was supposed to highlight Camilla's charitable work had become the catalyst for a crisis that threatened to undermine everything the royal family had worked to achieve in terms of public trust and institutional stability. Neither side showed any sign of backing down, and the consequences of their standoff were now playing out on the world stage. The third phase of their conflict had transformed a private family disagreement into a public constitutional crisis that would require careful navigation to resolve without causing permanent damage to the monarchy itself. The fourth day of the crisis dawned with an unprecedented level of media attention focused on the royal family. International news outlets had picked up the story, and royal correspondents from around the world were providing analysis about the potential long-term implications for the monarchy. The hashtag Royal Rift was trending globally, with public opinion sharply divided between those supporting William and Catherine and those defending Camilla's right to organize her own events. At Buckingham Palace, the King's senior advisors had called an emergency meeting to discuss damage control strategies. The palace's most experienced communications professionals, constitutional experts, and senior household staff gathered in the private secretary's office to address what had become a full-blown institutional crisis. "The situation is unprecedented," said Sir Clive Manning, the King's private secretary, addressing the assembled group. "We have senior working royals publicly withdrawing from coordinated engagements due to internal family disputes. This threatens the fundamental operating principles of the monarchy." The Director of Communications, Rebecca Hartwell, presented polling data that showed the crisis was beginning to affect public perception of the royal family overall. Support for the monarchy remains strong, but there's growing concern about internal stability. The public expects the royals to present a united front, especially during challenging times for the country. Sir Clive nodded grimly. His Majesty needs options for resolution that preserve both family relationships and institutional integrity. The current trajectory is unsustainable. Meanwhile, William had arrived at St. James's Palace for what was scheduled to be a routine engagement with a veterans' charity. However, the media presence was anything but routine. Dozens of reporters and photographers had gathered, hoping for any comment about the ongoing family situation. As William stepped out of his official car, the questions began immediately. "Your Royal Highness, can you comment on reports of a family rift? Will you be attending the Queen Consort's gala? Is the Princess of Wales being deliberately excluded from royal events?" William maintained his composure, offering a polite smile and wave before entering the building. But, inside, he felt the weight of the attention and the knowledge that every expression and gesture was being analyzed for signs of his emotional state. During the engagement, William focused intently on the veterans and their families, discussing their service and the charity's important work. But even these dedicated supporters couldn't help but notice the unusual atmosphere surrounding the visit. "We hope everything works out with your family, sir," one elderly veteran said quietly as William was preparing to leave. "The country needs you all working together." The comment hit William with unexpected force. He realized that their private family dispute was now affecting public confidence in the institution they all served. The weight of responsibility for resolving the crisis began to settle more heavily upon his shoulders. At the same time, Catherine was conducting her own scheduled engagement at a children's hospital in London. Like William, she found herself surrounded by an unusual level of media attention and public curiosity about the family situation. Catherine had always been skilled at maintaining her composure under pressure, but the intensity of the current scrutiny was testing her abilities. During a visit to the pediatric ward, she focused completely on the children and families, bringing her characteristic warmth and genuine interest to every interaction. However, when a young patient asked innocently, "Why are all those people outside taking pictures?" Catherine felt the reality of their situation settling in. Their family conflict was affecting not just their own lives, but the people and causes they were meant to serve. Back at Clarence House, Camilla was experiencing the full force of negative public attention for the first time since becoming Queen Consort. The morning's newspaper coverage was brutal, with several columnists questioning her judgment and suggesting she was overstepping her role within the family hierarchy. "Queen Consort's power play backfires," read one headline. Camilla accused of isolating future queen, proclaimed another. The coverage painted her as jealous, petty, and harmful to family unity. Eleanor found her reading the coverage in her private sitting room, surrounded by newspapers and looking more dejected than she had ever seen her. "Your Majesty," Eleanor said gently, "perhaps it would be better to avoid the coverage for now and focus on potential solutions." Camilla looked up with tired eyes. "How did this become such a disaster, Eleanor?" "I was simply trying to create a meaningful charitable event." "Sometimes our best intentions can have unexpected consequences," Eleanor replied diplomatically. "The question now is how to move forward constructively." Charles entered the room at that moment, having just concluded his meeting with senior advisors. His expression was grave as he sat down across from his wife. "The situation is becoming untenable," he said without preamble. "The palace is receiving calls from government officials, Commonwealth representatives, and senior figures who are concerned about the stability of the monarchy." Camilla felt the full weight of her decision crashing down upon her. What had started as a desire to control one evening's focus had mushroomed into a threat to the institutional stability Charles had spent his life preparing to lead. "What do they want me to do?" she asked quietly. "They want resolution," Charles replied. "The current situation is unsustainable for everyone involved." As they spoke, Charles's private secretary knocked on the door with an urgent message. "Your Majesty, the Prince of Wales has requested a private meeting with you this afternoon. He's indicated it's regarding resolution of current issues." Charles exchanged a look with Camilla. William's request for a direct meeting suggested he was ready to discuss potential solutions, but it could also mean he was preparing to escalate the situation further. "Please confirm the meeting," Charles said. 2:00 in my private study." The afternoon meeting between father and son took place in an atmosphere of tension and formality that both men found painful. William arrived punctually, his expression serious and determined. Charles had spent the preceding hours thinking about potential compromises and solutions that might satisfy all parties. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," William said as he settled into the chair across from his father's desk. "I think we need to discuss where this situation goes from here." Charles nodded. "I agree completely. The current circumstances are damaging to everyone involved, including the institution we all serve." William leaned forward slightly. "I want you to understand that this isn't just about one event or one decision. This is about fundamental respect and the way our family operates as senior royals." "I do understand that," Charles replied. "And I want you to know that I've spoken extensively with Camilla about her decision-making process and the implications of her choices." "What has she said?" Charles chose his words carefully. "She acknowledges that the situation has escalated beyond her intentions. She's genuinely concerned about the damage being done to family relationships and the monarchy itself." William studied his father's expression, trying to gauge whether this represented genuine remorse or simply concern about public relations consequences. "Is she prepared to acknowledge that her decision was wrong?" William asked directly. "She's prepared to discuss modifications to her approach," Charles replied diplomatically. "That's not the same thing," William pointed out. "If we're going to move forward, there needs to be acknowledgement of what happened and assurance that it won't happen again." The conversation continued for over an hour, with both men exploring various approaches to resolution. Charles was torn between his loyalty to his wife and his recognition that William had valid concerns about respect and family unity. "What would you need to see in order to resume normal family cooperation?" Charles finally asked. William had been thinking about this question for days. "I need Catherine's invitation to be restored, with a genuine apology for the exclusion. And I need assurance that future decisions about royal events will include appropriate consultation with all senior family members. And if those conditions are met, then we can discuss returning to normal coordination and cooperation," William replied. As the meeting concluded, both men understood that they had made progress toward potential resolution, but significant challenges remained. Charles would need to convince Camilla to accept terms that might feel like a complete capitulation of her original position. That evening, Charles had one of the most difficult conversations of his marriage. He explained to Camilla exactly what William was requiring for resolution of the crisis. "He wants me to apologize and restore Catherine's invitation," Camilla said, her voice flat with disappointment. "Essentially admitting that my entire approach was wrong. He wants acknowledgement that the exclusion was inappropriate and assurance about future consultation," Charles clarified. "The specific words matter less than the substance." Camilla sat quietly for several minutes, contemplating her options. The past few days had shown her the full consequences of her decision. The charitable causes she had hoped to highlight were now overshadowed by family conflict. Her reputation had taken a significant hit. And the stability of Charles's reign was being questioned because of choices she had made. "If I do this," she said finally, "what assurance do I have that William and Catherine will actually participate constructively going forward?" "You have my word that I'll work to ensure all parties approach future cooperation with good faith," Charles replied. The next morning brought the beginning of resolution. Camilla's private secretary called Kensington Palace with a message that the Queen Consort would like to speak with the Princess of Wales personally about the upcoming gala. When the call came through, Catherine answered with polite but cool professionalism. "Catherine," Camilla began, her voice carefully controlled, "I wanted to speak with you personally about the gala situation." "Of course," Catherine replied, waiting to hear what Camilla had to say. "I've been reflecting on my decision regarding the guest list, and I realized that I didn't handle the situation appropriately. Your exclusion was not justified, and I regret the way I communicated my reasoning." Catherine felt a small sense of relief, but remained cautious. "I appreciate you saying that. I would very much like to restore your invitation and have both you and William participate in the event," Camilla continued. "Your support of these charitable causes has always been valued, and I was wrong to suggest otherwise." The conversation continued for several more minutes, with Camilla offering what amounted to a genuine apology and Catherine graciously accepting the restored invitation. By the end of the call, both women had taken steps toward repairing their relationship, though both understood that rebuilding trust would take time. Within hours, the palace released a brief statement confirming that the Prince and Princess of Wales would be attending the Royal Foundation Gala and that all upcoming joint engagements would proceed as originally scheduled. The statement was carefully worded to suggest that scheduling conflicts had been resolved without admitting to the deeper family tensions that had caused the crisis. The media response was immediate and largely positive. Royal correspondents noted the apparent resolution of the conflict and praised the family for working through their differences privately and constructively. Over the following weeks, the royal family gradually returned to their normal operational rhythm. William and Catherine resumed their full schedule of joint engagements, while Camilla proceeded with her gala planning with renewed focus on the charitable purposes she had originally hoped to serve. The Royal Foundation Gala itself took place 6 weeks later and was widely regarded as a success. Catherine's presence at the event was noted by media and attendees, but the focus remained appropriately on the literacy programs and domestic violence support organizations being highlighted. Camilla's speech was well received, and the evening raised significant funds for the featured causes. However, the crisis had left lasting effects on family relationships and dynamics. While public cooperation was restored, private relationships required more time and effort to fully heal. Trust had been damaged and would need to be rebuilt through consistent respectful behavior over time. The episode served as a stark reminder to all involved about the delicate balance required in royal family relationships and the potential consequences of allowing personal preferences to override institutional considerations. It demonstrated both the fragility and the resilience of the monarchy as an institution, showing how quickly private disagreements could become public crises, but also how determined effort could restore unity and functionality. For Camilla, the crisis represented a painful learning experience about the limitations of her role and the importance of consultation and cooperation in family decision-making. For William and Catherine, it reinforced their determination to maintain their positions as respected senior royals while working constructively within the family structure. For Charles, the resolution of the crisis marked an important milestone in his reign, demonstrating his ability to navigate family conflicts while maintaining institutional stability. The successful resolution strengthened his position as both a father and a king, showing that he could balance personal relationships with constitutional responsibilities. The royal family emerged from their crisis with a deeper understanding of their interdependence and the importance of maintaining unity in service of the British people and the Commonwealth. While the scars of the conflict would fade over time, the lessons learned would continue to influence their approach to family dynamics and public service for years to come.